This is the Biz News Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
Successful negotiation, where there's a balancing of needs, can be reached easier if those involved bring mindfulness to the negotiation table. That's according to Matthew Moseley, a communication strategist, author, and speaker. He says that while active listening is a key skill for successful negotiation, doing it effectively requires getting out of your own head and developing empathy. This is something he honed while setting 3 world records for long-distance swimming. He joins us for this Biz News podcast. Matthew, I understand you had a bit of a swim recently this summer down a river. Tell us a little bit about that.
You betcha. I sure did. On June 27th, I teamed up with American Rivers and did the first ever swim down the Green River through Canyonlands, and it was for 40 miles. And it was continuous swimming for 14 hours and 36 minutes. So close to 15 hours. It was the first ever swim down that river. It was certified as a world record by the World Open Water Swimming Association. And I swam and with our team to raise awareness about drought and Western water issues and what's happening out here in the West with climate change and all that stuff, because water, I believe, is probably the most critical issue of our time. And if we can't figure out how to, kind of deal with our water management issues and clean water, we're going to be in a thick of trouble there. But, I also swim, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit, but I've got some good lessons about what I bring from swimming and adventure swimming to the meeting table and to the boardroom and to business in general.
I can imagine as you were swimming down the river, any long distance swimmer, it becomes more than physical. It becomes mental, does it not? That your mind goes deeper than it would normally go. And so what thoughts did you come out with at the end of all of this regarding communication and meetings?
That was my 5th long distance swim. And what I like to tell people when I'm doing speaking engagements and stuff to groups is that, the long distance swimming, what I've really found is that there's a lot of the same rules and kind of the universal principles that can apply to being successful really in any endeavor. And that includes for entrepreneurs and businesses and people who manage large organizations. And that you got to put a good team around you. You got to get the right people who can fill in the gaps of what you don't know and what you can't do. And then good leaders can take that information and assimilate it into a bigger picture and a bigger goal. And that's, one of the things that good leaders do is they have audacious goals and they set big dreams and they have big visions, and they're able to clearly communicate that with their team. Perseverance is a big one that I've learned. You touched on it, that a lot of these challenges become much more than physical. They're really mental endeavors. And I even train with a fighter pilot named Mark Williams, who's a former F-16 fighter pilot, one of the last Americans to ever see hand-to-hand combat in the air when he did served his time in Baghdad as a fighter pilot there. And, the mental conditioning and being really sharp and focused and having a very clear grasp of your situational awareness and kind of emotional intelligence is so important, not just with swimming, but I also, in meetings. Mark's in my new book, Ignition, Superior Communication Strategies to Create Stronger Connections, that just came out by Routledge Publishing this past June. And in his chapter, he talks about, I interview Mark and I call him a Jedi mind master, and you learn these sort of strategies and tricks. But we kind of joke about how we both love meetings. I love meetings because it's sort of like improvisation. It's theater. It's live theater without a script, or hopefully you have an agenda, but kind of anything can happen. And, taking some of those same, that sharpness and clarity from open water swimming and into a meeting is so important.
You must be the only person on the planet, well, maybe one of the two people on the planet, who will admit to liking meetings. For heaven's sakes, how does that happen that you like meetings? If you are the sittee as opposed to the presenter, how do you manage that?
Oh yeah. Well, great question. And people do call me crazy because they're like, "Oh, I hate meetings." I'm like, "I love meetings because that's where the gig goes down. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where assignments are made, deliverables and presentations. And usually, if you are invited to a meeting, you should have a purpose. You should bring something of value to that table. So what I love to do is before I go into a meeting in the hall or in my car or outside, I take several 3 to 5 really deep belly breaths and really center myself. And I focus on that question. What am I bringing to this meeting? Maybe I'm presenting and then that's pretty clear. But sometimes, it's just, hey, it's our Friday morning check-in and I'm going to have the CEO of an energy company, the regulatory affairs people, the government affairs, legal, communications. What am I bringing to the table here that's of value that I can add? And so, you notice this, especially today in a meeting where everybody is on their phones and they're on their laptops and they're very distracted. And that is such a wrong approach. What you want to be in a meeting is so present and clear so that when your time comes to speak, you know exactly what to say and you say it with brevity and clarity, and then you shut up, just be quiet and let somebody else speak or let people react to you. Now, finally, my final thought on this meeting meditation, that's what I call it, is that I like to, in the beginning of a meeting, I go around the room silently and I just look at every single person and I say, what are they there for? Do they know what they're there for? What are they bringing? What can I learn from them that will help contribute to a better meeting? In the book, I talk a lot about improvisation, and that's a communication skill that we bring to the boardroom and that we bring to meetings. It's a live theater. And one point I make in the book is the improvisation coach that I work with, Alyssa Alberg, posed this question: how do I support somebody if I don't agree with them? Profound question. And she says, in improv, somebody throws you an idea that you hate. What's your job? Your job is to make it better. Same in a meeting. Somebody throws out this really dumb idea. It's so easy to poo-poo it, go back on your laptop, get on your phone. What an idiot. No, our job in there is to make it better. Right?
How have you managed to, as you present to certainly large groups, and you're an old hand at that, and you mentioned people are sitting there with their stupid phones, tap, 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 tapping away at them. Other than confiscating the phones at the door, how do you handle that?
That's I don't know if I have any magic answer to that, because I think that's just a societal problem and lack of attention, and that people just not caring about where they are and what they're there for. I can't solve that. But what I can do is I can try and tell them a really great story, and that so they'll be like, oh, what's he talking about? He's talking about blowing up a bomb with Hunter Thompson and how that's going to relate to communications. All right, maybe I'll listen to that a little bit.
Let me ask you this. What was it like palling around with Hunter Thompson in his last days?
He was a pretty remarkable man, and I learned so much from him. And one of those little lessons that I impart in the book, it's chapter 4. And literally, I'm not joking, we had just come in from blowing up a bomb. And I think, Lyle Lovett and his parents were there. And, all these famous people. There's the writer from Vanity Fair. And we go outside and he hands me a 12-gauge shotgun with a propane canister wrapped in nitroglycerin sitting on top of a keg. And this is in Aspen, Colorado. And he says, here you go, son. Well, I'm from South Louisiana. So I blew it up, afraid that we all might die in the process. But I didn't know what was worse, right? missing the target or just being a complete loser for not wanting to shoot the gun. So I was like, I took the risk. But what he asked me we came back inside and we were all discussing the recent elections. And he said, son, do you know what the meaning of the word politics is? And I was like, I've been in politics for 20 years and I could not answer this most basic question. Voting, wrong. Governance, nope. You know, I didn't know. So he said, son, politics is the art of controlling your environment. And those who control their environment best win the day. And this happens for entrepreneurs, and it happens for candidates and campaigns, and it happens in advertising. Those who are out front and proactive are the ones controlling the debate. They're the ones setting the terms and the language that other people will be responding to, right? And then what that does is it forces other people to react to them. And so controlling your environment was one of the biggest lessons that I took away from Hunter, because, you know, rightly or wrongly, he was kind of a master at controlling his own environment. But he lived by his own rules and did his own thing. And one way to look at that is no further than Tesla. You know, Elon Musk knows certainly in business, there's a term of art called first mover advantage. You know, it's kind of the same thing, you know, controlling your environment. And those who are out there sort of first are the ones, you know, look at Tesla. Now people are all chasing them and reacting to their designs and their terminology and their language and their approach to making electric cars. So I think we can learn a lot from that in life, and for entrepreneurs, especially like product launches and things like that. Really important.
Matthew, we've touched a little bit on your book, Ignition. Tell our listeners what you think is the most important chapter. If they are on a short airplane flight, what should they read, and maybe just skim over the rest?
Oh yeah. Well, you know, obviously the chapter 4 with Hunter Thompson's pretty good if you like blowing up bombs and then taking away some communication lessons from it. No, but in general, you know, part 1 and just the first chapter lays out my premise, where the whole reason I wrote the book is that we live in the world today that is so hyper connected and we're so interconnected. And I can talk to you here over this magical Zoom call, but yet we find ourselves at its period of extreme isolation and loneliness. And this is playing out with health issues and drug addiction and suicide with teens, you know, something that I've worked on before. And so I wanted to discover and maybe give some strategies to people for making connections again and why that's so important. You know, throughout history, scholars have shown that even though there were other sapiens, and in our human development, there were other animals and tribes that were much stronger and much smarter than we were. But as sapiens, our secret sauce was our ability to communicate and to collaborate with one another for a greater purpose. So I think we need to find that again and go back to our roots and why that matters. And that, you know, there are great communicators out there, but if you're not doing it for a bigger purpose, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about your company. What is it that you guys do?
You betcha. Ignition Strategy Group, we're a team of folks, and we sit at the intersection of business, public policy, and government. And we specialize in high stakes communications. And that can mean anything from crisis to reputation management. But what we really like to do is work with organizations who are trying to be proactive about an issue. Let's say it's education funding or bringing attention to water, right? And managing, you know, and trying to run public education campaigns for people about why water matters and why we should care. So I really like these big, meaty, thorny issues, big public policy, you know, some of the most critical issues of our time, really, I think that we're facing. And I have a quote in the book near the end from the Hopi prophecy that says, "Do not look outside of yourself for a leader. We are the ones we've been waiting for."
That's certainly something that people might want to have engraved over the doors of their offices. As a communicator, though, how do you counteract this world of disinformation that seems to swallow all sorts of major issues in this country, from COVID to politics to you name it?
You betcha. What a great question. And it's something that I kind of just barely touched on it, but it's possible to be doing, all the things right, and being a great communicator. We've seen this with our last president, great communicator, but for what reason? What are the reasons there? And if you're a leader of a company, for instance, you're running a big utility company, like I work with Xcel Energy, also do a lot of work with AT&T, and I've worked with them in the past on some different campaigns. You know, During this past year, it was really difficult for big companies to keep and maintain trust. I think trust is the big issue that we're really looking for when we're doing communications. Some people think it's to impart information or disinformation. They'd be wrong. When we're communicating in any form or fashion, whether it's an email, a text, a press release, or a press conference, or a rally, we're looking to build a relationship with our audience. We want to take them on an emotional journey. And I talk a lot about that in my book. And that emotional journey is a trajectory of what do we want people to think? What do we want them to feel? And then what do we want them to do? As Hunter would say, buy the ticket, take the ride. How do we get them to buy? How do we get them to care? That art of caring that's one of the big reasons I wrote the book was, how do we get people to care? What goes into that?
Do you answer that question? And if so, what is that
Oh,
answer?
I do. I attempt to answer it and lay out about a dozen different strategies and tactics for how we can get people to care. Some of those are, better messaging and how we create messaging that resonates with people. And I talk about a message triangle that we use with a lot of clients when they're about to go before a TV camera to make sure that they are clear and crisp on what they're going to say. We talk about the hero cycle, right? The hero's journey. If you know, Joseph Campbell in 1949 wrote a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And he talks about the creation of the monomyth, which is the story from The Wizard of Oz. Think Luke Skywalker, his hero's journey. You think the Bible. All great stories are put into this framework. And if you allow me to go through it really quickly, all great stories follow the pattern. A young girl leaves home. She meets bad folks. She meets good people. She has opportunities. She overcomes trials and tribulations. And then as she gets down here to the bottom, her world changes somehow, right? She's chasing a treasure. You're Luke Skywalker and you've now discovered the lightsaber, right? And you're off to a new world. You've just teamed up with Han Solo and you're off to different universes. And then comes my favorite part always, the reconciliation with the father figure, right? Jesus getting nailed to the cross. Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Using the Force. All stories have this part. And then the heroine finds a way to get back home. They come home a changed person. Dorothy meets Auntie Em in The Wizard of Oz. She's just off the yellow brick road and everything's hunky-dory. And they come back with some sort of treasure for the community. Now, what's interesting is that throughout campaigns and in advertising campaigns, we tend to think of our product as, the shampoo is going to be the hero that helps the woman achieve the best luster in her hair, or the candidate, our presidential candidate is going to be the hero that slides people across. But it's not. The hero is the consumer. The shampoo is merely going to be the helper that helps them go through their day feeling confident with lustrous hair. The hero is the voter who needs that vessel of a candidate to sail them safely across turbulent seas of fear and chaos, right? So we want to think about who our helpers and our heroes and where we fit into this hero's journey, because that's how, again, we can tell good stories to connect people better.
Wow, Matthew, that is great. And I know a lot of our listeners and viewers will be exploring that further when they look at your book. We realize that you are kind of en route on a vacation and you stop mid journey, as it were, at a Wi-Fi spot, at least in a desolate part of Colorado, or at least a lonely part, probably not desolate. What would you like to add while we have time that we haven't had a chance to talk about?
Well, it's pretty funny. We've for the past 26 years have gone down a family river trip to Canyonlands in Utah, down the Colorado River or the Green River. And here we are finding ourselves traveling there, and I-70 through Glenwood Canyon is closed because of massive mudslides. So we are taking the alternate route to the north. So yeah, it is actually pretty desolate. I'm in the very tiny little town of Oak Creek, Colorado, and I could just give you a little bird's eye view.
Oh, there's the tour of the town right there.
Yeah, that's it. Don't blink. But it's a beautiful little place. And you know what's so funny? As I was setting up for the interview, I saw a guy walking down the street with a cup of coffee, and it's like, Skylar? Ended up being an old friend who was Governor John Hickenlooper's press secretary. I just saw him on the street before the interview. So you never know what's going to happen, right?
Now we know where press secretaries go when they retire.
Right. Yeah. So, I'm really looking forward to getting on the river. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Now, one last question. There must be a website that you have someplace hidden away. What would that be?
Yeah, you bet. People can find us at ignitionstrategygroup.com. And you can also check out a lot of my personal writings and adventures and swimming at MatthewLMoseley.net. And it's MOSELEY.net. I'm also in Wikipedia, social media, all around. And I'm also available and do a lot of public speaking trainings, message trainings, crisis communications trainings, and media trainings. So we're always available for that. Give us a shout. And also really looking forward to this September. I've got a lot of book stops coming up. I'll be in Raleigh on the 15th, and then Chicago on the 18th, and New York City on the 20th with my friend David Amram, the legendary jazz composer and musician who played with Dizzy Gillespie and Thelonious Monk. Yeah, we're going to have a blast. So, and then I'll be back. I got a couple other speaking engagements. So we're just trying to make the best of it and have a great time out here.
You've been watching the Biz News Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@biznews.com. Thanks for watching.